Good afternoon. Caught you off guard?
I was just scribbling notes here, but yeah, good afternoon.
How are you?
I'm good. What about you?
Absolutely fantastic. Well, it's not fantastic outside, is it? But I remember
No.
it's all up here. It's all up here at the end of the day. I keep telling myself liquid sunshine when it's raining, and it conditions your mind to think positively about the situation. And it's somewhere up there in the clouds. If you go up in a plane, it is nice and sunny just above those clouds. Remember that. Every time you go, you notice that you go up on a plane on holiday and you're it's really dreich down in the bottom, and you get above the clouds and you go, holy shit, it's brilliant up here.
Yeah.
It's like, why can we not just be above the clouds all the time? But then that's the mental thing. See that above the clouds? Get yourself out there, get you in the cloudy head and get all that above and all the rest of that woo-woo stuff. And it's like they're only trying to change me to motivate me. Of course we're trying to motivate you.
Yeah. I mean, there is still a lot of motivation out there. I mean, although it's a dreary Monday morning, I've been on the phone to quite a lot of people this morning. I've spoken to a few new investors this morning and things as well. So everyone's very much on the go.
I think people are making decisions every single day to either to do something about their current situation. You can't just sit and do nothing. And somebody said to me, you know, if you progressively do a 1% increase all the years, you get a huge increase. And the compounded effect, if you do a 1% increase every week or something like that, it goes to about 32% overall in the year. And they says, but if you don't do that, you progressively go down to zero. And I went, no, I would argue with that and say you go down to negative. You actually go right past zero. Because he was thinking about it mathematically. See, this is how the programming, this is how you're programmed like this. Mathematically, he was thinking you can only go to zero. And I'm like, no, you can actually go to negative. You can completely go right under what the goals that you wanted to and be worse off the next year than you are right now because of the way you think and the way you don't act towards your goals. If you sit and do nothing, I always say, with the most successful people I've spoken to, there's been a lot over the years. Most say if you're not expanding, you're contracting. Yeah. You don't sit in the middle. That's the reality. And that's just in everything that you're doing. That's just in normal day-to-day life. That's not anything to do with a business or having property investments. That's just in generality. If you're not expanding, and I mean your knowledge, your attitude, the way you think, the way you interact with other people, create more wealth for yourself, all these different things. If you don't expand your network of people, then you tend to contract because they're away expanding somewhere else. They're not talking to you anymore because you're not really talking to them. You're not interacting with them. So you regress as a result of that, and therefore you're probably worse off next year than you are this year. Make sense?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are obviously reconsidering their current situation and looking how they could change and adapt just to the current climate and the way things are. Everybody's having a wee bit of a better look at themselves and their current situation. So,
well, we talked about the weekend yesterday about the property market crash of 2022 yesterday.
Yeah, seen that.
And the 3 reasons why it won't be the same as 2008, and the 4 reasons why landlords and investors will continue to buy as a result of that. That's why. And Stirling actually says it perfectly well. This guy is amazing, Stirling. He's got the voice. The voice is absolutely fantastic. If you're not expanding, you're contracting. True, there's no middle ground. We need to keep growing. Thanks very much for Stirling.
Yeah, thanks for that.
So, what is this all about? Well, why are we doing the Wealth Creation Show? Well, ultimately we're trying to educate people. I mean, we hear that a lot. And it's completely flawed about the whole thing. About they'd love to go into property, but they don't know why I'm there. They'd love to go into property, but not anymore. If you get into property these days, the question is not of luck. It's a question of learning. That's the most important point. It's a question of learning.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no real need to win the lottery or come into some money or inherit property. Instead, it's simply about really learning about easily accessible strategies that make investing in property without an extra penny in your pocket possible for that. And that's why we say it's easily accessible. And we actually really mean it, because this is what we teach all the time. Anyone interested in investing in property is welcome to, interact with these shows and to ask questions on these shows as well. You're also welcome to interact on our personal Zoom, our private Zoom session. And the link are in these details to Richard if you want to be a part of that private Zoom session. We're not selling you anything. I'm not asking you to drink my Kool-Aid or anything like that. That's not what we're doing. You don't need to listen to a word that we actually say. In fact, you don't even need to watch this, to be honest. And some of you might go, yeah, you're absolutely right. Switch off right now. Fine. Bye. Hopefully, your life will move on and you'll expand and you'll be wealthier next year in all the generalities, not just money itself. But I tell you what, you might just listen and you might just learn something that you might think, wow, I could do that right now. And that will just push me a wee bit further forward and elevate me a wee bit higher for next year or the coming months. These sessions are purposely designed for property newbies and novices as well. You don't need to have, you don't need to bring absolute, you can actually bring absolute zero existing property or finance knowledge to the table when we talk about this. So you don't need to be the all-encompassing expert. Don't feel intimidated by me because I've been in this for 30 years. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to impart my knowledge to other people so they'll learn what I've learned, so they'll have a bit of prosperity in their life as well. That's really what it's down to, and building maybe your own investment portfolio and whatever you need to do out of that. Does that make sense for Richard, for you?
Yeah, I think these shows are very much a choice if you want to obviously take part and watch them. And it's all about building knowledge and learning together, and sharing ideas and sharing each other's experiences and journeys, I think, especially our private Zoom, which we've got happening in the last Thursday every month. And we have investors who we've helped and investors who are new coming on and sharing their stories and sharing their successes with others, and kind of keeping the momentum going for people that are maybe starting out and maybe feel a wee bit lost in things. It's a brilliant platform to come on and do that.
I find it quite for this. This is a classic, right? And I'll just see if I can. A flea has a 36-inch vertical leap. Now, if you capture a flea and put it in a jar, okay, you'll put the lid on the jar, and that flea still has a 36-inch vertical leap, okay, but it will start to jump and jump inside the jar all the time, and its head will keep hitting the top of the jar. And until he starts making adjustments, okay? And then the flea will reduce his jump just to the point where it's just enough to not hit that lid, okay? Now, he gets knocked back down every single time. And it's funny, these fleas have baby fleas, for example, and the baby fleas are born with a 36-inch vertical leap. Yeah. But what you don't realise is the baby fleas watch their parents, and their parents can only jump 8 inches. So their parents actually teach them just to jump the 8 inches to miss the top of the jar. And they jump as high as their parents can jump as a result. And what we do as people, we do the exact same things in our life. We allow our existing environment to dictate to us. Mm-hmm. And this is what this is all about. It's learning to lift the lid off the jar and be able to jump out and teach ourselves, because we've all been taught only how to jump 8 inches, and that's it. Unless you're lucky enough, which is very few and far between, to have that parent or that mentor that actually taught you how to leap out of that jar and how to leap to your true potential. And we're all born the same: 2 arms, 2 ears, 2 eyes, in its real sense. So what makes them fundamentally different? And it's down to here. And we're going to talk about the fear. Let's talk about a couple of things in the news so far. Richard, what's happening so far in the news in terms of property investment? Anything?
Few things in the news I picked up on. Changes, obviously, at capital gains tax. They've implemented the changes on the days to report and pay your capital gains. Now, originally 30 days. That's now been extended to 60 days. So for those of you that aren't familiar with capital gains tax, it's taxed on any profit that you make on a buy-to-let or a second home sale. And rates are usually between around about 18, 20, 28%, depending on what bracket you fall into.
I've just been nailed with that right now, because obviously I've sold some of my ones in my existing name to my limited company. Now, the reason I've done that is because I keep the asset, but I alleviate the capital gains position and I still earn income out of it. So I don't chop down the tree that bears the fruit. It's more tax efficient for me to move it to another vehicle to make it easier for tax planning in the future and easier for generational wealth to pass it on. So that's the reason I'm starting to move my portfolio out of my own name. Because when we built our portfolios in the beginning, you know, at the very beginning, it was all in your own name because the taxation advantages were there. But the government's completely taken them all away now. It makes more sense to actually have it in a limited company as a more or less a wrapper in terms of what you're doing. Okay. Hi, Roy. How are you? This takes me to this bit. I'm going to talk about this bit here, Richard. I'm going to share my screen now because Darren Price had actually asked me about capital gains, because I keep saying to people, listen, capital gains is it's an important thing, but you have to listen here.
Okay.
About deferred taxation. So this is my point is, and I'll just stop sharing it. I'll take it off the now. I'll stop sharing it now. My point is, a lot of people are out there still saying this thing about, you know, how they've made money, how they've made profit out of what they've done. So they've bought a property for a certain value, they've refurbed it, and then they've refinanced it at a higher value, okay? And then they've taken more money out than they've actually invested in the first place. And they're saying, I've made a fortune and I've got all my money back, I've got an infinite return, and I never need to worry now. And I'm going, well, what about your deferred taxation liability for capital gains? And they're like, what? What are you talking about? I went, well, you could end up with a deferred taxation liability, could leave you exposed if you need to get rid of that property quick. So this is for your benefit. I'm going to do this. This is one of the properties I've bought and I still have today, and I'll talk you through it, why it's not possible, and I've got a deferred taxation liability, and why I lose as a result of it. So quickly, let's go through some numbers. So this is 144 Taylor Street. I bought that for £16,000 in the year 2000. So year 2000, I bought it for £16,000. Okay, make sense?
Yeah.
Now, I got that went in the credit crunch, and that went up to a valuation of, guess what? About £60,000. Okay, in the credit crunch. That was 2006. So I immediately ran in, and what I did was I got a buy-to-let mortgage at £50,000 because I was able to do that for that reason. So I've got £50,000 as the mortgage. Okay, so write mortgage. Just want to make sure everybody can see this properly. Mortgage 50 grand. Okay, so the mortgage is £50,000 now, and the value of that property today. Is what's the value of that property today, Richard?
For your one at 144, you're probably about 55. I think there's another one. There's another 3-bedroom on at 50.
So 50,000.
Yeah.
Now, if the value is 50,000 still today, and it was 50,000, it was 60,000 in 2006. It's never really gone up in value. So I've got a problem here. If I'm going to try and offload this property, I've got a £50,000 property, but I've got a £50,000 mortgage. Now you might think, oh, you can get away with scot-free, but I've still got costs for real estate and lawyers and everything else to absorb into that. Plus the fact I've got a deferred taxation liability. CapEx, capital gains, cap tax. I'll just say capital gains tax, okay?
Yeah.
Because what happens is if I've got it sold for 50,000, right? And I originally bought it for 16,000, and I take one from the other, I've got a capital gain there of 34,000. Now I've got a £12,500 allowance, okay? But then if I still take that off for my allowance, I've still got 21,000. Now I'm a higher rate taxpayer, so I'm paying 28. So multiply that by that, and then we're sitting at a £6,000 allowance. So I've just sold my house for £50,000, okay? I've got incidentals, which is probably about £2,000 for the lawyer's fees and the staging fees, maybe 2,000 or 3,000. So I've got I've got 3,000 for that, just say, and then I've got that taxation liability to pay on that 50,000 as well. So I've got 50,000. I'm minus the £3,000 costs. I'm minus also my taxation. Okay, minus that. So I've got £40,000 in my hand. But remember, my mortgage, excuse my spelling, my mortgage is 50 grand. So I've got to pay the bank £9,000. So I've just had this is what I talk about, the deferred taxation liability. So you know, Darren, thanks for asking the question, and anybody out there. So when you're going to start the journey and you're going to remortgage, go through these numbers and actually just make sure that that is going to work out for you if you start to remortgage as a result of that. And so hopefully, if you slow that down, I mean, if you're not very sure about that, I can go over that again and again and again until repetition's the mother of all skill and everything like that. But we've got a show to run. But the deferred taxation liability is there. Now, I'll hear most of you saying, I'm never going to sell. Well, I maybe thought that as well, but there is times which you don't know in the future. Like, for example, you might lose your job. You might lose.
I was just going to say that, Jim. What kind of situations would bring you to that?
You might have children. You might have to upgrade your house to a bigger house, and then might have to sell that to get the equity out. You might have an encumbrant debt on you that actually is an encumbrant debt on you. Then maybe you go for something else, and they go, but you've got a buy-to-let mortgage because the rules might have changed in the future for credit scoring. And then you're sitting, oh no, I've got that now, but I can't get rid of it because I've mortgaged it up so much to the hilt that I actually can't offload it now, and I would have to pay money back to get it, and I don't have £9,000 to pay back.
Yeah.
Hence the reason why I talk about that all the time. Now, everybody says to me, why on earth have you still got that property then? And I'll tell you why. How much is that rent for that property, Richard?
I think we're doing it about 500 now.
So we'll just say 400 for the last 20 years.
I think it's about 475, 500 just now.
Yeah, so we've got 400 for the last 20 years plus 400 times 12 is that per year, 20 years plus that multiplied by that. I've made £96,000 in rent out of that. Now the mortgage, admittedly, for me is about £200 a month. So the mortgage for me is £200 a month. So basically, I've still made a profit before overheads of about £50,000 on that property. I bought for £16,000.
Yeah.
Do you not think that was a great deal?
It was.
Yeah.
And
I've still got it. And it still earns money. So that's exactly why I've still got it, because it makes sense. And that mortgage actually runs to 2032, because I didn't say, oh, go and run it just for 10 years, because that's what I'm expecting. I went, how many years can you give me? And they went, I can give you, 30 years if you want. And I go, yeah, beauty, give me that. Because I could pay this off anytime I want, really. But I'm getting really cheap lending still at that rate. So it would make absolute sense for me to actually just continue to have that property and earn money out of it regardless. But it doesn't, what it doesn't do at this point in time, it doesn't allow me to sell it to my company, my limited company. So I've still got that in my name and it still has interest. Therefore, the tax rules apply to lower rate deduction only on interest, mortgage interest payments. Now, what's going to happen in the future is people in their own name are going to have that taken away. I definitely think in the future that mortgage interest deduction at lower rate will disappear for single owners, sole investors. It will stay for limited companies, but it won't stay for individuals. So what are you going to do if you've got it in your name in the future and that happens as well? So this is why you have to be concerned and make sure that you're still okay and you can see an encumbrant deferred taxation liability built in there and make sure you're still in that position to do something with it.
Yeah.
This is actually quite a good one here. Brian actually says, how do you deal with inheritance tax? Standard inheritance tax rate of 40%. It's only charged in the part of your estate. Threshold, example, your estate. Yep, absolutely. It's generational wealth that gets put into trust. Hence the reason why I've moved it into a limited company, because that'll be passed on in a trust, which will pass on. And that is not part of your estate when you do that. And so that's how I'll do that, Brian. Wee bit more complicated than what I've just said, but it's pretty straightforward. Every single wealthy person does that. That's why they're able to do it, and you don't have huge tax bills for inheritance tax. Not fair, really. Not fair, really, to be honest. But that's the way of the world, and that's how it works. Yeah.
Also, so you included obviously selling fees, solicitor fees, and things. Could these costs be
deductible?
That's what I was just going to say. Just so people know, obviously, the cost of your solicitor and selling fee, so that will reduce the amount that you pay.
Deductible. That's why I say to people, I maybe just want to sell it privately because it'll save myself money. But if you're a higher rate payer and you're maybe paying £2,000 to sell your property, then you're actually only really you're only really spending about 1,200 quid because you're a high rate payer at 40%. Therefore, you're getting the tax deduction against the capital gain.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So you're not paying as much as you think it is because it's deductible against your income. It's coming in. So that's another big bonus out of that as well. Okay, let's anything else in the news, Richard? Because I thought I'd cover that while you were on capital gains.
Yeah, no, I think that's really helpful, and that will help a lot of people because capital gains isn't always straightforward in everybody's mind. So that was good. Yeah, other things. The Queen's speech last week. The Queen's speech last week. It brought up a few things that I've seen a lot of articles and people talking about online. With the reform on the renters bill. And this would have an effect on the no-fault evictions. Now, Section 21 evictions have been talked about being scrapped for a long time.
Now, remember that's in the English market.
I was just going to say that is English law.
But we have that already.
Yes. So, but obviously they're looking to scrap that down south. But they are giving renters a lot of better rights when they are asked to leave and dispute comply and on a dispute when they're complying with the terms of the lease and things. But for me, it's there's a reform on grounds of possession, which obviously giving greater powers to tackle arrears and antisocial behaviour, which I think is an important one, especially given the implications we've had up in Scotland with recent restrictions on eviction with the Coronavirus Act and things. Although that has been reverted, we do intend to see things change as the year goes on and possibly into next year. So yeah, it's inevitable. So we'll see how that is. But I just thought there was a few, but there is a lot of people talking about it online and on some groups and things. And just to make sure people are aware that there are differences between our laws and what goes on down south.
Yeah, I mean, Scottish housing legislation is completely different from English housing legislation. Completely, they're two opposite ends of the spectrum. They do look on the Scottish legislation quite envious because the solicitors, especially, because it's pretty straightforward. But our legislation is all based on Roman law, from years and years back, common law principles and stuff like that as well, which doesn't exist in English legislation, which I thought was quite weird. But at some point, we were actually two separate nations, and that's why that was the case, and that's why that was set in stone. EPC targets, what's happening with that?
There's talk of them extending this. We covered this a wee bit on Saturday morning, Jim. I didn't want to talk about it too much, just obviously the takeaway for this. But,
well, people could watch Saturday morning. That's it, really. In a nutshell, briefly. In a nutshell, 30 seconds.
Briefly, the main point is that they're looking to extend the date where you need to obviously have new lets up to an EPC grading C from 2025. They're pushing that forward, I think, to 2026, giving landlords an extra year, which I think is good. And that will be obviously for the minimal banding on new lets to be at a band C. And then existing lets will still remain at an upgrade date of 2028 for a level C.
Listen, anybody out there, to be honest, if you're selling, I'm buying. That's what it comes to. If you're selling, I'm buying. That's it. I understand the dynamics. I understand the long-term principles of property investment. There is not another investment vehicle that performs as well over the medium to long term. Nothing can touch it. Every single person you know is super wealthy, always has a huge amount of investment. Most of their investment is actually in property. I actually saw a guy the other day, he was on, he's extremely successful at what he does. He says, look, you know, I invest possibly around about 10% of my money in various different strategies. At the very most, he says, I put it in. But he says, see, when it comes to property, it goes all in completely. He says there is no doubt about that because property always goes up with inflation or way beyond inflation over the medium to long term in terms of returns. I mean, even in the Fife market itself, you know, inflation's gone up maybe 8%, but in the last year, the Fife properties have gone up 15.8%.
Yeah.
No brainer, eh? Let's go on to F.E.A.R. This is what drives it. This is where we're coming full circle, isn't it? About the F.E.A.R. thing. And the flea story. Remember talking about the flea story and how everybody round about you. I went for a wee breath refresher this morning with Ian, and I was, you know, we were talking, and I was like, I was getting real agitated about the whole thing when I started talking about how this is and how the media is compounding this and how they're deliberately trying to engineer this to actually almost have a crash in the market. But there is no similarities. If you look at yesterday's show that Perry and I did about the 3 reasons why it won't be the same, nowhere near the same, one of them straight away is maybe the multiplier, in other words, the salary to average price is 8 times to 9 times. It is only 6 and 5, by the way. But at that time when the multiplier was 8 times your average salary, and that's when it crashed, that's because people couldn't afford it anymore to buy more property. Prices couldn't go up any higher, so there had to be a realignment. They then said at that time, they failed to say that interest rates at that time were 7% on average. At this point in time, interest rates are 1.7% on average. So proportionately, it's utter bullshit at the fact that there's a similarity between that and any other time. That's really what it comes down to. And this is what I talk about fear. Take everything with a pinch of salt that you hear. There's loads of doom and gloom mongers on the internet right now, peddling this story every single time. But every time you hear something like that, all you need to do is, well, what's your thinking behind that? What's your reasoning behind that?
Question it.
Where does that come from? Yeah, pose a question to that person. Ask them politely, what's your thinking behind that? What makes you think like that? But what you find most of the time is they're just regurgitating what they've heard from someone else, who's regurgitating what they've heard from someone else, who's regurgitating what they've heard from someone else. And that someone else just so happens his or her agenda is to crash the market to make money.
Yeah.
And that's why they do it. They're influencers. So they influence other people to do their bidding in order to maximize their potential to earn revenue from a crash. Because you can bet against the market on some platforms and actually benefit as a result of it.
Yeah.
It's just like your, you know, your Betfred and stuff like that, where people bet against each other. The house always gets their money, regardless, come hell or high water. But someone wins, someone loses, and that's really what happens fundamentally. You know, a politician I know very, very well. He says, you know, it's all very well, Jim, you're winning, but somebody's got to lose for you to win. As if it can make me feel guilty about it. Oh, thanks for that. but the reality is, you can't put yourself in a position where everybody can win. He just doesn't get that. He's just a black or white person, and I am as well. But I've now begun to condition my mind to realise that everybody can win in every situation by the teachings of being taught by people like Rich Dad Poor Dad, Keith Cunningham, and Kiyosaki as well. So that's the teachings I've been told, that, you know, and understand that dynamics completely. But what is fear fundamentally? I mean, we encounter a threat to our emotional or physical well-being. There's the emotional thing that everybody's saying. Yeah. It triggers a psychological flight or fight or freeze response. Some people freeze and do nothing. They're just like, oh, I'm not really sure. I'll just do nothing then. And to be honest, it's designed for survival. Without the fear response, you'd leave yourself wide open to danger, caveman days, you know, these sort of things. It's like, well, there's a T-Rex. Well, I'll just do nothing. It's like, well, and it just eats you. Yeah, in the modern world, our bodies respond to fear in many situations in which we face no physical threat. There's nothing physical about it at all. The fear is triggered by a known outside event, a loud noise, looking over the edge of a high place, or standing in front of a crowd. That's how it's triggered. When you're afraid, you feel your heart beat faster, your breath quicken, you may feel a pit in your stomach, dizzy, sweat, dry mouth. Your muscles may feel more tense or weak. As a result, your body is sending an adrenaline to your blood, to your muscles and your brain, and that's what causes it. It's preparing you to fight or flee. But it often happens in situations where we don't really need it to do either, because it's inherent in our nature as human beings. That's caveman days it goes back to, but we don't apply that to that anymore. I have Bonnie, right? Bonnie, my cat. See, when it comes feeding time, all of a sudden the cats go ballistic at each other. And it's because that same instinctual process about the hunter-gatherer thing, all the endorphins get released into their system, and they've got to fight for what they've got. And they don't realise, well, they are sentient beings, I suppose, but they don't realise on our level about how the fact that that's doing that deliberately to them to protect them and to make them get their food. When in actual fact, if they just stood there, the food would be put in front of them.
It's going to be there regardless, but they don't realise.
You understand the flight or fight now, how I see it in human beings. So that's typically what happens in our situation. So how do you overcome fear? And where did it all start? And it's about identifying your fears in that. Now, in the beginning, as in wealth creation, as in property, my initial fear was I wasn't very sure if I could do it. But for me, it seemed so simple. That, you know when something seems so simple, you think, there must be something wrong.
Yeah.
Now, behavioural science experiment, actually, we did this years ago. We actually stood in the high street at one point in time and gave out fivers. You know how many people it took them?
Hardly any, probably, because that's just not something that you expect to be done.
They had no idea, and because everybody thinks it's like there's got to be a catch, there's something wrong. Why am I doing it? Why are you trying to give me a fiver? What's in it? And this is the flight or fight in here. This is this mentality. If it's too good to be true, it must be. This is what we're conditioned with. This is the flea in the jar thing. This is your parents have taught you this as well, and it's been conditioned into you. You have to break that programming, and this is what fear drives forward. So I actually thought, surely everybody would be doing this because it makes absolute sense. Now, you've seen the numbers before, how I do things, and it falls into place straight away. And then you sit and think, I mean, what do you think to yourself? Do you think, oh, God, I should get into property? Or do you think, oh, it's maybe harder than we think?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, everybody has their own conceptions of how or where fear comes from. And I think when it comes to property investing and things, obviously, I watch what you do with your investments and obviously help you along the way while we're doing things in property sourcing and all the rest of it. And from a lettings aspect, which obviously I'm trained in and have done for a lot of years, but in terms of property investing on a bigger scale, it does raise questions for me like, is it that simple? Can it be done that easy? And would I be able to do that as easy as Jim does that? And do you know what I mean? And I know that a lot of investors feel the exact same way. And that's their barriers that they come up against. Same questions I would question myself. And people feel like it's only them, but it's not. Everybody thinks everybody's in that same mindset at the beginning.
Exactly. And I think it's definitely got a lot to do with programming and the way we've been taught, and even our school systems teach us that as well. Only to do so much, only to. I mean, at what point do you when you say you get a good job? Like, I'll get a good job, but I think being good is in direct contrast to actually it's the enemy of being better or greater. And the fact is, when people say, oh, get a good job, I mean, how much will it take for anybody to actually just compromise on their dreams? When you start out, first of all, you think to yourself, I'm almost talking you at your job, by the way. At the end of this saying, I'm giving my notice. It's like, but when you think about that, now, I'm not saying that. What I'm not saying is run and give up your job. What I'm saying is, what I did was I worked in something I really loved in industry, manufacturing and accounting, and I really loved that. And when I became bored in that job, I then moved on to another company, which actually gave me more learning opportunities, if that made sense. So I just upgraded constantly all the time. So over the 8 years I was in industry, I went from trainee accountant to financial director within that period. And that was me, that was my life, and that's how I did it. But at the same time as I built my investment portfolio outside of that to create my lifestyle. So the living was day to day was created by my job, which I loved. And I would love to go back to manufacturing. You know that. I sat and quizzed somebody the other day. We were at the Bow House, the the market, and I was talking to I think it was she was making elderflowers, elderflower wine and stuff like that, and creations and alcoholic drinks and I actually started to ask her, and she says, "What, I feel like you're interviewing me." And I went, well, the thing is, because I'm in manufacturing, I just love the process. I love to understand how it all works. But that's, for me, that's how I overcome fear. Because I begin to understand how it works. And I begin to understand and look at the dynamics.
Ask the questions and look how it works.
I think the first thing is actually learning to overcome your fear as a problem-solving challenge that you identify and challenge in order to overcome. And what is it you're actually afraid of? Where is the deep down seated thing? Is it just that general feeling? But can you actually localize that to what it is you're afraid of? Most of the time, people can't do that because they don't understand. It is actually just within them. It's their chemicals and their hormones doing this.
I think for me, and I think, and it'll be the same for other people, that a lot of fear comes from the lack of understanding or not knowing how something, like you say, you want to know how something works and how it all ties in together. I think once you understand that, then you didn't have the fear of maybe doing something wrong and looking silly, because you're like, well, I know how this works, I know how to do that. But if you don't, then you obviously you're reserved to do something in case maybe you look silly, or I don't know.
Well, that is one of the ones that you're talking about. You've hit the nail on the head. The fear of feeling silly. I mean, sit quietly for a while and observe your thoughts and the feelings and your bodily sensations, and write down what actually comes up, and be as specific as you can. Consider embracing a daily mindfulness meditation as well, and to practice, to give you more clarity on what drives you, and as you find your center, you'll feel empowered to confront your fears. I mean, even recognizing that fear can work to your advantage. Probably our emotions exist to tell us things. That's the key here. When you feel the fear, your soul is trying to tell you something. So remember to listen to it. If you feel overcome by stress or distracted by a subtle but persistent anxiety, it's likely a subconscious fear that needs your attention. Rather than avoiding it, don't avoid it. You know, you do get that, don't you? You get a lot of people that just avoid it, and they just like bury it deep down.
Bury that. I just got
That's
to say
not
that.
healthy. That's not healthy, by the way.
It's not.
I've done it many a time when I've been there, and it comes out even worse later on.
Yeah.
It's like a volcano, boom! It all comes out at once. So don't drill it down. Discuss it with someone, even if it means discussing it with us personally. Private message us back and forward. More than happy to talk that through with you. When you use your anxiety to advantage and you find out that information, instead of your threat to your survival, it can ruin you, remember. So you need to overcome it. It becomes your ally if you can do that, and it's a critical source of guidance to reach your full potential. Probably the other ones is actually sitting with your fear. You know, sit for a while, and there are times for actions and times for reflection. So classic example, when I'm put in the spot sometimes, now, for example, when I'm asked to buy something, I always say, give me 24 hours to think about it first.
Yeah.
And everybody goes, but you'll never buy it. And I go, well, if that's the case, I'm no buying it now.
Mm-hmm.
If I need to buy it now, then the answer is no. Because I need time to think about it and time to reflect on what I'm doing. And that's a wee trigger for me to understand. It's like, so I don't leave myself in a position where I'm fearful and where I feel anxious overnight. Because then I've back to something I'm really sure I've actually done. And that's when you get to the next day and go, oh, what have I done? And that's what the direct selling laws were actually put in place for. The 7 to 14 days.
So you're allowed that grace period where you could change. I think that's relatable, and I think as a letting agent and things over the years, I mean, there's so much to learn and to build on your knowledge in lettings. I think we're well over 150 pieces of legislation and things, and people often say to me, "Oh, you're so knowledgeable and you know so much about lettings and things." And it's like, because I've spent a long time learning about it, but I don't always have the answer. And sometimes when people come to me and ask me something and I don't know the answer, I know the right place to go and look for it. So I'll say, look, I'll come back to you. Let me go and find out the right answer for that. And it's just, if you're put on the spot, knowing the right answer to say at that time, and then to come back, and not to just then get in a fluster and think, God, I don't know the answer to that, and let the fear overtake you. Because I think knowledge is a good part of obviously building confidence, and then with confidence, then you lose that fear.
And that's why we talk about these sessions being more knowledge than anything. And if you don't feel you're ready to get involved in maybe property investing, hang on in there. Because I tell you what, at some point the penny will drop and you think, I know exactly what to do now. Because remember, opportunity is where preparation and readiness meets. That's really what it comes down to. So, you know, point of readiness is opportunity and preparation. When it meets at that point in time, that's when you're ready to go. And it might not be this point in time right now, but I tell you what, if you hang on in there and keep listening and keep educating yourself and keep learning, there'll be some point the penny will drop and you'll go, I know exactly what to do now. So acting too quickly to overcome your fear can lead to behaviours that do more harm than good, like reaching for a drink. That's the one thing you should never do, is to calm your nerves. Do not do that. That is the devil. and
it becomes too much a habit.
And how do I know that? Because I've been there. Indulging in comfort food, classic example as well, or even repressing the feeling entirely.
Yeah.
I've done all these. You know, again, we're talking about last week when we talked about our wealth creation show about my Lamborghini Huracan. It's like listen, you can learn by wisdom, or you can learn by experience. Wisdom costs less and it's less stressful. Experience is actually you go through the whole thing start to finish. So just learn by wisdom, by somebody that's done it before. It can tell you and answer all your questions you want to ask. Sit with your fears for a few minutes. Don't let them overcome you. Think about it and what is the root cause of it. What's the story you're telling yourself about why you can't overcome that fear in general? And this isn't to say that you shouldn't take action. It's just a moment of reflection that can have a great effect on overcoming the actual overall fear. In any way that is productive, deliberate, and effective. That's the key here. I would say that. Classic. Look, Andrea said that, and thanks very much for reminding us, Andrea. Same with antidepressants. They don't solve the problem. They just help you cope with it. So what antidepressants do? Here's what they do. They're neuroinhibitors, and they actually slow down the depletion of serotonin, which is the happy drug that your gut produces every single day to help your brain feel happy. It's a fuel that gets produced every single day. So what the antidepressant does is it blocks all the wee holes in the sieve where it's all fallen through, and actually depletes it at a slower rate. So you feel a lot less, you feel a lot happier and smoother during the day. Hence the reason why people have the classic example, I just feel zoned out all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Congratulations, you're meant to be. That's the whole point. It's actually protecting you. It's a mechanism designed to protect you. And I would argue that that's possibly, as humans, how we're always meant to feel. But we don't realize that now because we've had the lid on the jar, and we've been taught to jump at 8 inches instead of 36. And I would argue that that's actually generally how we're meant to feel. We're meant to be zoned out. We're meant to feel passive to things. We're not meant to be aggressive as human beings. But that's how society has created us, because of everything that's round about us. And because of the fear and anxiety it causes is what goes on. So just be mindful, be aware of that in yourself and within yourself in order to help yourself move forward.
Yeah.
Probably creating goals are a must in this, possibly. What do you think about oftentimes processes of overcoming fear becomes stymied by uninspired or elusive goals that we set ourselves? You know, do you think sometimes we put too much pressure on ourselves to succeed?
I think a lot of people do that, and I think a lot of people have construed expectations of what their of themselves through other people and through other people's views. And I think set your own goals that you feel comfortable and that what you want to achieve, and work towards them in a way that you feel you can achieve them. And not to anyone else's expectation. I think that could put you in a situation where you feel really, obviously, where the fear could build up, and it could kind of construe how you're going to achieve your goal if you've got the thoughts of someone else's expectations in mind rather than your own.
And
if that makes sense.
Absolutely, it does, Richard. Sometimes people, it's a classic example, people buy things to impress people that they don't like. And it's probably similar when it comes to setting their goals and aspirations. What does your life look like, and what does the life you deserve and desire look like? You know, you've got to think about these things. People often don't want to think about them because they're always taught from a young age not to aspire to too much, just in case you'll be disappointed. That's another classic, isn't it? It's like, don't aspire, don't reach too high, just in case you're disappointed. And there's a lot of people actually do that, and they don't. And whereas my mentality now, I'm programmed for this, is not, never mind the moon, let's go for the stars. And if we didn't hit the stars, we'll hit the moon on the way down. I mean, that's a classic, isn't it?
Yeah. It's like a lot of things that are drilled into us when we're younger and grown up, and just society in general. We've done a show about this before, and it's like the thing, like when you stood in the high street and you're handing out £5 notes, and people are like thinking there's a catch to it, but it is because it's drilled into you. You don't get anything in this world for nothing. Do you mean things like that are drilled into you? So then that's where you automatically think, well, why are you giving me a fiver? What's
And
the
you absolutely do
catch?
get everything for nothing. You've just got to believe it and expect it, and it happens. It's the laws of attraction. It works every single time. People come to you because you're successful at what you do, and they want you to help them be successful as well. And that's why it will happen, and it does happen for nothing because of what you do and who you are. There's people out there. There's 6 billion people on the planet, I think. Surely you can find 50 people that'll resonate with you or work with you.
Yeah.
This is what this is all about, really. You know, putting your name out there and making yourself seen, putting your head above the parapet. You might get eggs thrown at you, but who cares? I just look at everybody else that throw the eggs and think, well, it's easy to be a critic. That's fine, but stay where they are. Then I'll just move on. Just, you know, that's all the doubters and all the rest of it. I mean, your goals and everything like that. What does it look like? Is it just a someday maybe, or a plan to do actively you actively want to work towards? Is it something that's attainable that you're willing to commit to? The first step of overcoming fear is whether or not you're creating a compelling goal. This all comes back to the proper goals that you really want, not what somebody else wants for you. Because most of us want to please our parents, don't we? And that's really what we're designed to do. So a lot of people out there, and I'll guarantee you, because I was one of them, they're in jobs to please their parents.
Yeah, that is a common thing.
Yeah, the doctors, that's familiar. most of the people I know in the Asian community were almost destined to become doctors because that's what their parents wanted.
That's what the expectation was. Yeah.
Because it's like, and I know a few people like that on my courses and stuff like that, and talk about these stories. It's like, no. I want to be, you know, a Chinese girl she wanted to be a comedian, a manga, you know, the artist and all the rest of it. She wanted to do that. She wanted to do everything. No, you don't want to be that. You want to be a doctor. It's like, I want to be a doctor. It's like, no, mum, I do not want to. What do you want to do that for? And it's that whole mentality of, you know, almost having to disappoint your parents. But unfortunately, guess what? They're no with you all the time. So you have to do what's right for you. So it is overcoming your fear. Make sure you've got a goal, and it must be a must. Conversely, if you don't accomplish this, you'll be lost. You know, that's the reality. Yeah, and this is what I talk about. A lot of people are lost in translation. I kind of use that as a, you know, they're just lost in space, more or less. They're not really sure what to do, where to go, and how to do it. So dig deeper into your goal. And what is your ideal outcome? Is it financial growth? Set some of these targets. Don't be disappointed if you don't need them, if you don't meet them. Just refocus and redo them for the next year and redo them for the next year. You know, you've seen it before. I did it last year. It's like, I'll maybe get 8 properties this year. Now, what the hell am I playing at? It's like, what do you mean 8? If I was going for 8, I would end up buying about 4 and be happy with that. It's like, no. I'm wanting 50 last year and end up buying 17. But hey ho, I got 17 more than I didn't expect.
Yeah.
And I'm on my road, and you know how that compounds in wealth over a long period of time, and it produces income every single month as well as a result of that. Which actually
last week's show demonstrated that.
Which actually gets reinvested every single time. So that's the one. Now, here's a key here, which I would tell you: recognize your excuses. Fear always makes you put things off. I'm really tired. I've got other stuff to do. Oh, it's a dumb idea anyway. These are excuses that probably sound quite familiar, don't they?
I think everybody in their times probably used excuses similar to that.
I've said it out loud and said it to myself before. It's like, oh, I've not got enough energy. Well, I have. Because I tell you, at the time that you've not got enough energy, tell yourself, if you've got children, if a building was burning down and your children were in that building right now and you had to save their life, would you have the energy to do it?
Of course you would.
Yes. So where did you find that energy if you didn't have enough energy right now at this point in time? My point at hand.
Yeah.
If the dream's big enough or the motive's big enough, the facts don't count. That's the reality. So you've probably said yourself out loud, and you've cohorted with constructing excuses for potential failure and the loser's limp. It's like, oh, I've got a hamstring. The boys that used to pull up at the end, you know, before the finish line in the 100 meters and hold their hamstring right in front of the camera. Oh, he's pulled his hamstring. Most of them hadn't pulled their hamstring at all. They just didn't want to be second place. So they made an excuse that they hurt themselves. so everybody would see that, so they would actually feel better about themselves. They were only second place. What's wrong with being second?
I know.
It's a lot better than being third. It's a lot better than being fourth, and it's a lot better than being last.
Yeah.
Don't be upset with that. You've achieved something as a result of that. It's amazing. The Olympians. It's like, you know, one of the guys in the Olympics came away and said, "I've got a silver medal," and threw it away in the ground. I'm like,
Really?
holy shit! Aye. It's like, oh my god, right in front of everybody. Threw it on the ground, disappointed, and right in front of the camera, I said, "I can't believe that," and just threw it away. And I thought, you are that clearly not the right sportsmanship.
No.
For example, clearly not the right mindset. But when you think about it, he's the second best person in the world in that sport.
Yeah.
Wow, would that not be something to be proud about? But that's because he's pushed himself to the limit, to perfection, and expected to win every single time, but never actually thought about how would I feel if I came second.
Yeah. Never prepared himself for maybe becoming second, and mentally prepared to accept his achievement at silver rather than just gold.
Now, can you just reiterate and reframe what you just said there? Never prepared himself. He doesn't need to prepare himself. He just needs to realise that sometimes he might have to accept the fact that he might not be as good on the day as the other person.
Yeah.
You can't always guarantee that. And that's the same thing in everything you do, even in property investment. Sometimes you just not get there. Look at the one I just lost because of one day, and I thought I didn't want to pay 3,000 extra.
Yeah.
The next day I did say I want to pay 3,000 extra, and somebody else paid 10,000 extra.
Yeah.
I should have just paid the 3,000
Should
extra.
have just done it in the first place.
You idiot! See how I just told myself that?
Yeah.
You don't do that to yourself either, by the way, because you just call yourself an idiot and then it reinforces it. So that's not the things you do to yourself. It's, you know, so again, I'm learning all the time. Remember that. So recognize you're using excuses. Here we go. This is all the things that we just talked about the other now between you and I, back and forward.
Yeah.
Recognize that you're using excuses. Figure out how to overcome them. You're too tired. Adjust your schedule so that you can have a better night's sleep, for example. Put the telly off an hour earlier. Go to bed an hour earlier. Get up later, just a wee bit later. It doesn't matter. If you need to do what you need to do to accomplish your goal, then what price are you going to pay for that? Some people just don't want to pay that price. Well, you'll not be that successful if that's the case.
It's amazing how much benefit you could get for a good sleep.
Here's the other key here. Surround yourself with success. Here's a classic. Andrea said it. Successful people often expect their offspring to be just as successful, but that can lead to children becoming anxious and depressed. However, that's because they put the expectation on them rather than just say, do your best.
Yeah.
So you know what I used to say every single time my kids went away to school? Have a great day and do your best. That's it. Never said work hard, because work hard is a different connotation. Work hard implies they're trading time for money. That programs them to that way. I always said, have fun and do as best as you can. And if they came home at night and they said, I didn't really do that, I didn't really get this and I didn't really get that, I says, did you do your best? Absolutely. That's all you can ask of yourself. That's how children will not lead to depression and anxiety if you give them no real expectation from you and don't put pressure on them, but just tell them to do their best and have fun at what they do. They've got their whole life ahead of them to succeed in whatever they want to do. And I'll guarantee you, they probably didn't even know what they're going to succeed in yet at this point in time. More than likely. I wanted to be a policeman. Was I a policeman? Never. Did it disappoint me? Who cares? That's the reality.
Yeah.
Most people will go, that figures. Surround yourself with successful people. Proximity is power. That's really what it comes down to. They've also known the laws of attraction as well, or the idea that in essence, you become like the people you surround yourself with. So if you're watching this right now and you're listening to this right now, some of this is going to rub off on you for the next time. Whatever you hold in your mind on a consistent basis is exactly what you'll experience in life. If you've turned your shoulds into musts and recognize that all your excuses, but still aren't sure how to overcome your fear and put your goals into action, it's time to examine your focus. That's probably where it lies.
Yeah.
So people who are truly focused on overcoming fear and achieving their dreams surround themselves with others who have the same mindset. I tell you what, it's quite difficult to get it when you're a bit. I was saying to Ian this morning, Ken, it's not easy to try and get people at the same level. To find them, they're few and far between. That's the challenge, and I have to try and find these people in order. But I also have to be very wary that these people aren't just trying to fleece you for everything you've got. Because in essence, you know, that's why some of them are where they are, because they're good at selling courses to people like me. That's really what it comes down to. So what I'm saying is that the people that have the same mindset, these are the people who not only look up to you, okay, but who will push you to achieve your goals, and you can look up to them as well. To overcome your fear, you need to raise your standards and allow others to hold you accountable. That's a really good one. Allowing others to hold you accountable. You've got to take it on the chin. Yeah. That's really what it comes down to. Adopt your growth mindset's another one. Find an invaluable insight into pain as well. Probably visualize your goals is another one. The one that I would say most important is visualize your goals. The mental work, the mental process. Actually identifying the real reasons why you're holding yourself back, determine the must-haves in life, overcome the fear that requires you to practice these habits daily so that will lead you to the true action. Goal visualization is really important, just to visualize yourself. I mean, last week I went through the whole process. I genuinely believed and I experienced the whole mindset of having a Lamborghini Huracan.
Yeah.
And yet I never paid one penny for it. And I had a great time for that whole week. I enjoyed the whole thing. I was in the car, I'd been round the car, I'd gone round the block, I'd had all the emotions, I felt all the endorphins, I felt the adrenaline rush when it took off, but I never even bought the car, and I've never even been in the car. And it never cost me a penny. How great is that? So visualization is a really good thing to focus on, and where focus goes, energy flows. That's probably key. So it can take the form of priming, meditation, imaginary training. There you go, imaginary training, same thing. But above all else, this is the most important thing at the end here, accept that you'll fail. Accept that you'll fail at some point in time. You will. It's just a natural progression in what you're doing and how you're doing it. That's the number one fear that people see when they go to accomplish the goals, that they'll actually fail. They fear it straight away. But like pain, failure can teach us a lot in this. In fact, failure is often better than the teacher of success. If you accept from the onset that failure is an inevitable part of success, you'll be less afraid of failing, and failure can provide you with valuable learning experiences that will positively impact on you on future strategies. Everyone fails, don't they?
Yeah, I think it's really important to always have that in your mind, that whatever you're doing, at some point along the way, you will come up against things and maybe feel like you failed, or maybe you will fail, and you will learn for that and build on that, and not to be fearful of it, because it's just a natural thing that will happen. It's all part of learning. In any aspect of business or whatever your endeavour may be. So,
world leaders, you'll know yourself, prominent chefs, artists, scientists, doctors, they've all failed at some point in time in something. Our society shies away from talking about failure, but instead celebrates successes. This creates the false impression that to be truly successful, you can never fail, and that's entirely inaccurate. So remember, embrace the fact that at some point in time you'll fail, and you'll always win regardless. That's it. That's it. We're at the hour. We're finished. Done. I could have talked about everything. We could have gone on for ages. But that's it. We've always said it would stop at an hour, just allow it to go on just for that. So we were going to talk about some of the projects that we're working on. We'll roll on to next week again. And it's goodbye from him.
Goodbye from him.
You were practicing that, weren't you? Goodbye, folks.
See you later, Jim.